Hello and welcome back to my bizarre toy box. Today I'm going to finish hooking up the logic for the main mission. All we have left to do is the part where the players fly over here to Patch-4 and acquire the TIE fighters and then fly away in them to the hyperspace jump point, which is out there. Now this episode won't be nearly as long as the previous one, but still, to save some time, I've already done some prep work for this video. So let me show you the Creativitoys that I've placed and what I've got so far. So we have some locators that we've placed around here. I'll just kind of show you where these are. We've got two of them over here. Some over here. And the exact placement of these doesn't really matter. You just want to scatter them around. Try to put them behind the rubble, because the player's going to be over here when we generate the enemies, so trying to give them some cover. As you can see, they're kind of behind things, like they're jumping out and ambushing the player. We have a target camera that is lined up with the locator over there, and lined up about like so. And it's one block above the surface of the ground. So I could put a little terrain cube under here and or just place the target camera on the ground and raise it up one notch. We have a dynamic trigger and a radar marker. We have 3 enemy wave generators, a logic and a replayer, and another radar marker. And then we've also got a trigger area out here for our hyperspace jump point with another locator. And the locator is in the middle. Let me just show you kind of where this is, if I can get the thing on it. There we go. So it's right in the middle of the box. And by the way, let me pick this up, put it down. This is about 4 times the size of the standard trigger area. So I've made this much bigger so that the player has a little bit of room to fly, because I don't fly very accurately, so trying to hit the little area around this locator precisely is going to be a bit of a challenge, so as long as you're close enough to it. So that's why I made this a little bit bigger. And I'll give you a look kind of at where this is placed. The exact placement of that doesn't matter. You just want it out there a little ways for the player to fly to. Alright, so that's what we have so far as the Creativitoys. And for most of these, all I've done is place them out of the Creativitoys drawer. I've also set up the enemy wave generators to save time. So this one is connected to locators around the toy box, around Patch-4. So basically over on this end. So those two, this one, and this one. Okay. The middle one is connected to locators over on the other side, like you see there. So those two here, this one, and that one, and that one. And then the last enemy wave generator is connected to 2 locators out on the fringes of Patch-4. So this one over here, and this one out here. They're kind of put a little further away because I'm kind of hoping those will be the last enemies, or among the last enemies that the player faces. Now this first enemy wave generator, I've configured the wave with 2 Guavian gang members and 3 long-range Nikto thugs. And again, I've already placed those in there, so you don't have to watch me scroll through that list, which is painfully slow. And in here, all I've done is set the generation delay to 0 and disable the generation effects. This one is set up the exact same way. The wave is configured the same way. The properties are configured the same way. And then this last enemy wave generator, for this wave I have 2 rebukers. You could make this 3 and add a 3rd locator out there if you want a little bit of a challenge, but I felt that was enough. And the properties are set up the same as the other 2. So the properties on all 3 enemy wave generators are the same. And that's all I've done, is set up the waves and properties on these and connected them to all those locators. And I haven't touched any of the other controls. Alright, so we're going to begin over here in the hangar bay where we left off last time. So the main mission logic over here is set up to key off the next section with a dynamic trigger. And you'll notice since we have come back from last time, Lando is in here and the Falcon is in here, which means the the level starter has kicked off the friend generator and the first vehicle summoner. And when I'm working in here, I kind of find I don't want them in here. Number one, just always leery about saving the toy box with those generated. And number two, I don't accidentally want to kick off any of the mission. Because if you do that without saving, I'm not sure if some of the states of those toys will get changed in your save files. So what I'd like to do is have this little button out here and just to remove Lando and the Falcon. So this will come over to the friend generator and do a remove all. And I'll also have the button do that for the vehicle summoner. And again, this is just for when I'm working in here. Once the toy box is built and tested, we don't need this button. Alright, so then we push that. Now Lando and the Falcon are gone. And that means this dynamic trigger isn't going to be active. And if I wander down that hallway, I'm not accidentally going to kick off something I shouldn't kick off. Alright, so last time we had connected up these 2 toys to that locator. And I believe I had set the properties for this. Let me double check that. Yeah, that's all set up. And I believe I had already set up these. Okay. So when the player returns to the Falcon and they're ready to fly over to Patch-4, this is what's going to kick off the next part of the mission at Patch-4, this dynamic trigger. Alright, and so on this dynamic trigger, we're going to do a new logic connection when entered by player any. We are going to turn off this radar marker. And on this radar marker, new logic connection, when this is deactivated, we'll turn around and turn off this dynamic trigger. Because again, like so many other times in here, we only want to do this once. Alright, also on this dynamic trigger, when entered by player any, we have a couple of toys on Patch-4 we want to initialize. So we're going to come out over here to Patch-4, and we want to set up the next radar marker for where they have to go next. And that's going to be this radar marker right here. So we're going to activate that. And this radar marker, we're going to do a new locator connection and connect that up to this locator. And on the properties for this, we're going to set the beacon type to be a yellow ring. Beacon location needs to be the locator, and the rest of the properties are fine. And we're also going to want a dynamic trigger over here, so when the player gets here, we can kick off the next part of the mission. So this dynamic trigger will do a new locator connection, connect up to the same locator, and on the properties for that, target needs to be the locator, trigger distance, we're going to set this to be 6. And this dynamic trigger, we want this off by default. So if the player decides to fly over here without following the mission, and they get over here, I don't want anything to happen over there until we're ready for it. And so we're going to come back over here to our level starter, and we'll go around this so you don't run into all of those objects. So on the level starter, a new logic connection on catalyze. We'll come over to that dynamic trigger. And turn that off. Which means when we're ready for this part of the mission, we have to turn that back on. And so that's the other thing that the dynamic trigger over here for the Falcon needs to do. So on that dynamic trigger, a new logic connection when entered by player, any, we will go turn on that dynamic trigger. And that will get the player over here to Patch-4. So we turn that on. So the player hops in the Falcon, flies over here, lands somewhere, and then they come over here to this radar marker. When they get here, this dynamic trigger kicks off the action for Patch-4. So on this dynamic trigger, new logic connection when entered by player any, we can turn off this radar marker because the player is now here. And we can also use this radar marker when it's deactivated to turn this dynamic trigger off, because again, we only want to do this once. On this dynamic trigger, a new logic connection when entered by player any. Next thing we want to do is kick off all of our enemy wave generators. So all of the enemies that are in hiding over here are going to jump out and start attacking the player. So we'll kick off the second one, generate that wave, and same for the third one. When entered by player any, generate that wave. All right. And then the player has to battle those enemies and defeat all of them before the next stage. And so on each of these, we're going to do these enemy wave generators. We're going to do a new logic connection when the wave is defeated. Input into our logic and. When the wave is defeated. Input. New logic connection when the wave is defeated. Input. And this toy isn't going to broadcast any trigger signal until all three of those enemy wave generators' waves are defeated. On the properties for the logic and, we're going to leave auto reset off. Alright. And then this will kick off the next part of the mission. So when all the enemies are defeated, we want our key to show up over here. And I've placed a temporary key out of the Gameplay Toys drawer. You find that here. Now this toy and these cages all come from Toy Box Takeover. And if you don't have that at this point in time and you're on a console, you're going to pay quite a bit for that playset, which is a shame because it is a really good playset. I like that Toy Box Takeover game a lot because you can use any figure and it's just a lot of fun. But I understand that's cost prohibitive for some. And the question was asked early on in the build video, what do you do if you don't have these? What can you do instead? And so what I would suggest doing, if you do not have those toys, is to set up a force field around this instead. And I would do that with another replayer. So what you can do, I'm going to pick this toy up, put it down. You can drop another replayer over here. All right. And you'll want to configure this with playback interval 0. And what you can do is build a little cage around that, or a force field. You can do that with the invisible barrier block, or you can do what we did with the hangar bay force field. You can use these blocks and style these to be the hologram style. La 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 la. Takes a moment to update that. Okay. And then let me delete that toy. Okay. So what you can do is, this will be empty space over here. You will not have the TIE fighters yet. You will not have the cages. So you'll come out of the editor. You'll step on your replayer to get the menu in the lower right. The bottom button is the one that records. On my Wii U, that's a B, so I press that to start recording. And then you're going to come over here where the cages sit, and you're going to build those cages. So you can use these walls to kind of build your own little cage. Use the large floor on the top to enclose it. Build a second one for the second cage. And when you're all done, come back out of the editor, step on the replayer, stop recording, and use A to clear, just to make sure that all works. All right, and then Y to play back, and that's what we have. So there is your alternative to those cages. And at this point, you can go ahead and place your TIE fighter inside each cage, so you'll have 2 TIE fighters inside those cages. And so what I'm going to do with the cages is I'm going to use this replayer to drop the key to unlock the cages. If you do not have the key or the cages, what you're going to do is use this replayer and clear it to remove the force fields. All right? And I'll show you both of those. So on this replayer, let's set the playback interval for this to 0. If you have the cages and the key, this is kind of what I recommend doing, because it's just easier. It's not that much easier, I guess. I'm going to come over here and pick this up just to get to that part of the toy box drawers, and I'll just drop that temporarily. I'm going to delete that key in a minute, but so we come over here to our original replayer. We step on that to start recording. I press B to start recording, off to get off the replayer and close that menu so I can get back in the editor. And we're going to place our key right out over here. And this might be a little tricky because you can see I've got that memory meter giving me problems because of that force field over there. So sometimes when that happens, you can kind of come down here. You'll notice I should have left that other replayer cleared. Sometimes trying to get down below where things aren't in view will drop those memory meters there, but that's not happening. Alright, let me stop recording this. Yeah, that thing is just being a problem. Alright, so let's clear that temporarily. Get rid of that. And it's still going to give me a problem with that key. Let's see. What happens if we go to something else? Of course, all of these toys here are just either large or... Oh man, that meter's just pegged. It's being a problem. What happens if I come out here? Can I get that meter to drop? I can get that meter to drop. Toy creators impact this most. That is just being crazy. Crazy, crazy. Oh, I've got enemies out here. How did I get enemies out here? Oh, I walked over where this thing is. Alright, that's where my problem is. I've got enemies walking around. Because I came out of that editor, walked past that thing. Alright. Well, this is easy enough. You got to be careful when you're setting up the logic. Oh, and I can't even do this. Oh, there we go. I managed to put it down. Good. Alright. New logic connection when pressed. Let's clear or defeat all of these waves. We're going to need to reset that logic and as well here. So yeah, when you're setting these up, be very, very careful. You don't want to wander anywhere near trigger areas like that dynamic trigger or whatever, where they're still active because the level starter hasn't been invoked to turn them off. Alright, delete those enemies. Well, that's already better. That lag is gone. Good, good, good. Alright, let's delete that. We'll drop another button to reset the logic and. Sorry about this. This is actually not a bad thing for you to see me messing up, because this might happen to you when you're building and you're not sure how to go about putting things back in their correct state and all of that. This is how you do it. Alright. And while we're here, new logic connection when pressed. Let's just go ahead and disable this. Turn that off. So this isn't going to be a problem. Alright. Now we can delete that button. Okay. Where were we? What were we doing? Trying to put this key down. Alright, let me pick that up, get that back to that part of the drawer. And then we're going to come over here. And I think I'm going to start with a fresh one of these. So let me drop that out there. Put a fresh one down. And just delete that. Okay, once again, properties, playback interval to 0. And then we will step on that replayer. Press B to start recording. Step off so I can get back in the editor. And then we're going to drop our key out over here, and that memory meter looks a lot better now. And we'll just drop this down here like that. Then we'll come out of the editor. Step on our replayer again. I press B to stop recording and A to clear. And that takes the key out. And now that we've done that, I don't need this other key anymore. We can delete this. I only put that in there just to save me from scrolling through those drawers. trying to save time, and I ended up wasting time. Okay, this episode's turning out longer than I wanted it to. But anyway, when this is complete, new logic connection, when complete, we're going to do a playback on here, and we're also going to turn on our target camera. New logic connection, when complete, turn on the camera. And that is so we can see the key and where it is, the player can find it. Now, if you do not have the key and you do not have these cages, what you have instead is you will have these cages here that I built for you and showed you how to create. So let me do a playback on that. That puts that back in there, and you've got your TIE fighter sitting in there. Okay? So what you will do, since you will not have this replayer, is you're going to connect this up instead with a new logic connection when complete. You will come over here to this replayer and do a clear. And I'm going to cancel out of this because I'm not going to keep this replayer. But that will basically take down the force fields around the TIE fighters. And again, these I would place these over here where these are sitting. And then also activate the target camera so that they can see those force fields going down. Okay? So that's what you can do instead. But let me go ahead and clear this replayer and delete it because I'm not going to do it that way. Okay. So in my case, I'm doing a playback on this one to put the key out there, and I'm invoking this target camera. Now this camera, we want to connect up to our locator, and we can reuse this one. No reason to drop another one if we can reuse what we have. And on the properties for this, we're going to turn on define duration. 5 seconds should be sufficient. Turn off glow through, and the camera target needs to be the connected locator. The rest of the properties are fine. Okay. And so the player sees that, and then they can go over here and unlock the cages. Now the other thing we want to do is we need to direct the player out to the hyperspace jump point. We're going to use another radar marker for that. So on this one, we're going to do a new locator connection. We're going to connect up to the locator that I dropped out here. This is going to tell the player where to fly to so they can get to the Armada. So we connect up to that location. And then on the properties for this, once again, the beacon type is going to be a yellow ring. That's a little bit easier for the player to see, I think, when they're flying around. Beacon location needs to be the locator. The rest of the properties are fine. So on our logic and, new logic connection, when that's complete, we want to turn on this radar marker to guide the player out that direction. Okay, just reviewing my notes here. All right. And on that trigger area that's out there, I don't want the player accidentally invoking that if they fly around and happen to fly through that trigger area. So we want to have the level starter disable that by default. So once again, we'll come over to our level starter. New logic connection on catalyze. We'll come out to that trigger area. Just a little ways out here. And we will deactivate it. So this will not be active when the toy box loads. which means we need to turn that on when we're ready for it. So one more connection from the logic AND when those enemies are defeated. New logic connection when the logic AND is complete. We will come out here and activate that trigger area. Okay, and when the player flies through the trigger area, it's going to do two things. New logic connection when entered by player any. We want to turn off the radar marker. I don't suppose you really have to do that, but we're going to. So we'll deactivate that. And then it also needs to invoke the toy box store, and we haven't put that down yet, so that part of this we will not do just yet. And I believe that is everything. That is it for the main mission logic. Next time I'll show you how to do the logic for the two side quests, and I think I'm going to try to do both in one video because they're very simple quests and the logic is not complicated at all. But until then, I want to thank you for watching, and let me remind you that I have logic diagrams on my blog that will help you connect the Creativitoys that I used today. The link is in the video description. You can also subscribe to my channel by clicking my photo in the lower right corner of this video. That's all for me today. Take care.